that we covered the last 2 weeks. And one of the things that kind of caught my attention on last week's show was how wastewater treatment plants inject the wastewater brine from, like if you had a reverse osmosis water treatment plant, the byproduct or the dirty water from the reverse osmosis basically gets injected into the ground, and it can go back to your aquifer. It could feed and fill the aquifer. Eventually, it would lead to that way. So I want to bring this up because I think people living on well water have a false sense of security about the quality where their water source is coming from. So I think it's safe to say that everybody is in what we call a reusable water state. And so what that means is if you live in town where your municipality feeds you the water, if you live out in your well and you have your own well which you're tapped into an aquifer, basically you're at a reusable water state. So the municipal water companies, privately owned or publicly owned, I think do their very best to treat the water to provide us with quality water, but there's limitations. There's only so much they can do. So you remember, we're still going to have pharmaceuticals in the water. We're still going to have the forever chemicals, which are PFAS, in the water. We're going to have the microplastics in the water. But I want to talk to those people, especially those that live up in the foothills, Morrison, Evergreen, Conifer. Do you realize that where your leach field goes? So you have water that goes down the drain, and the solids, just like in a municipality, the solids are designed to settle to the bottom of the holding tank, but then all the other gray water goes over out into a leach field. Now that leach field, the water from the leach field is going to seep back into the earth, into the ground. And for folks that live up in, Evergreen, Conifer, Morrison area, it travels through the soil and goes through rocks and crevices and gets right back into your water source, your water supply. So technically it's reusable water. That's exactly how it's gonna function. And so it's very common for folks to have coliform bacteria. Now, coliform bacteria is a precursor to E. coli bacteria. If you have coliform bacteria, you can absolutely, turn into E. coli bacteria. But think about this. I want you to think about all the property or housing subdivisions, let's use that word, that's up in the foothills. And think about everybody that's on well water and where your leach field is and where your well is. Think about every snow, rain, snow melt, that happens in the spring. We're going to get, I think you guys in foothills could get 6 to 12 inches of snow between tomorrow and Saturday. Once you think about that, and when it melts, it's going to go right on top of your leach field. And that's going to create water that's going to help with the runoff. But I want you to think about all the water that you use. Where does that water go from the leach field? So let's back up. And so a septic system in a private home is designed pretty much the same way that a huge municipal wastewater treatment plant is. So Mike was kind enough, last week to explain this in detail. And basically what happens is that water is dumped into this big pool, and the solids settle to the bottom, and eventually those are the biosolids. And then the other water, in a sense, is run off and fed right back to the Platte River, the Chatfield Reservoir, the Dillon Reservoir, or in some cases injected underground. And that's what refills the aquifers. And don't think for 1 minute that an aquifer probably may not be fed by the Platte River, and possibly an aquifer could be fed by water that's in the Chatfield. So there's a lot of ways that aquifers can get replenished. So think about it this way. People that live in the Eastern Plains, you live out in Byers and Bennett. Think about all the neighbors that are surrounding you in your nice little subdivision. Think about where your well is, and then think about where your leach field is. So you could technically, on a really nice storm, rainy, snowy spring, weekend, with all that water melt, I think in theory you could get cross contamination from somebody else's leach field if you have standing rainwater, because there's going to be soil saturation where the soil can only absorb so much, and then when you have standing water, it could move from one area to one yard to the other yard. And do you guys remember, was it 3, maybe 5 years ago, the big flooding that happened in Boulder? There were neighborhoods that were flooded and got contamination, bacteria contamination, because of the standing water, and it went from leach field to somebody's well. So those are things that we have to think about. So back to, the septic system, and then, the wastewater treatment plant. So basically the theory is the same. Now, I was thinking about this driving in to the studio this afternoon. Where I come from in Illinois, the septic tank was always separated from the gray water. In the gray water, we had an actual what we call leach field, where it was completely separated, and it was tunneled to a different location or trenched to a different location, and they dug out a big pit, they filled it up with sewer rock, and then covered it back up with earth, and you could tell where the leach field was, the gray waters, the soapy water, the hard water, because the grass was really tall and thick. But it wasn't associated with the septic tank. That was in a different location. So here, they're all the same. So the water basically goes out, no matter if you flush the toilet or you take a shower, the water passes through over the septic tank out into the leach field. So all water goes into the septic tank, and then the water runoff goes through the septic tank and out to the leach field. And the leach field size is based upon, the size of the home and how much water usage their engineer's going to look at and think, okay, this is, what we figure this leach field could handle 3,000 gallons of water a day. Or this leach field could handle 5,000 gallons of water a day. So that's, where they're designed. And some homes that are bigger, you also have to figure, water filtration. They calculate that, plus because of water filtration needs to be used in order for irrigation, because some on these higher end homes where they have well water and high iron content, they want to treat that iron content so it doesn't stain all the outdoor, what do you call that? The stone decorative rocks and stoneware that's outside. So, that also will take in consideration. But my main point is that the wastewater, byproduct water that goes to the leach field absolutely is going to end up in your aquifer. And especially, I mentioned the folks who live in the foothills, only because of elevation and sloping. So when water goes into the ground, it travels through different valleys. Water has an ability to create its own path. No matter, you guys ever drive, go up, was it Highway 40 to Grand Lake? You ever notice that the really nice rocks up there, the rock wall that they made as you go climbing up the mountain, you see the white staining on the brick wall? That's water that's penetrated through that wall. So you can tell they have certain drainage pipe that they're hoping the water goes through, but eventually water will create its own path, is my point. So the same when you're up in the foothills and you have water that in your elevation, and your water is running through your leach field, through the septic tank at elevation, it's going to go into the ground, but it's going to find its own path, and it's eventually going to end up in your aquifer again. So I think it's safe to say that we're dealing with reusable water. So reusable water means that all the wastewater that we have from a water treatment system is going to end up back in our aquifer, and that's the same with your local municipalities. It's going to end up back into our aquifers. So the farther east that we live, there's various different water treatment issues that we run into. You can have high sodium content, naturally high sodium content. You can have hardness, you can have iron, you can have sulfur. There's just such a variety of water issues, high total dissolved solids. And it all can be treated. But then what we have to start thinking about is the discharge water and where that's going to end up going to. Now, as it goes through the earth, I think it's safe to say that the earth will help filter out certain other contaminants, but the forever chemicals and the microplastics, eventually with rain and snow, eventually, as they get captured by the soil, the extra water flow that occurs because of Mother Nature, it'll end up right back into the aquifer and right back into our main water supply. And so that's why I think it's really necessary for everyone to think about treating their drinking water, and you treat your drinking water with a point of use reverse osmosis. But it all starts with the hardness test to make sure that your water hardness is within operating parameters for the reverse osmosis. Reverse osmosis is nanofiltration. It's at 0.001 micron. And one of the things that we're going to talk about after we come back from this commercial is commercial reverse osmosis systems and the importance of them having pre-treated water. And on a bigger scale, if you can't pre-treat the water, then I think they should not be used. And we'll talk about that when we get right back.